Welcome back, warriors, to a new chapter where we strip away comforting lies and stare directly into the eyes of power. Power, as the world defines it, is a brittle illusion, a flimsy veneer of fame, piled up wealth, or social metrics. But observe the masses. They chase these empty symbols while their inner kingdom crumbles with the slightest tremor. One calculated insult shatters their ego. A single setback dissolves their confidence. One cold rejection sends them spiraling into self-doubt. They've erected vast, glittering structures on sinking sand because they fundamentally ignored the single most crucial foundation: the mind. Machiavelli, centuries ago, laid this truth bare. The one who cannot control his own mind will forever be controlled by others. Understand this: the true theater of war is not the boardroom, the market, or the street corner. It is the 3 inches between your ears. And those who win this internal war, those who brutally conquer their turbulent emotions, those who silence the traitorous voice of doubt, and those who establish absolute mastery over their own thoughts, they are the ones who rule the world, with or without a crown. Today, we look into 10 dark lessons, principles not found in self-help books, but rather carved from the relentless, cold logic of human nature. These teachings are not for comfort, tranquility, or fleeting positivity. They are the blueprint for absolute internal control, strategic dominance, and forging a mindset so utterly unshakable that it renders you impossible to manipulate, impossible to predict, and, critically, impossible to break. The stark reality is that the world operates on a single, binary distinction: predators and prey. The psychologically strong dictate terms to the weak, the intensely disciplined dominate the impulsive, and the perfectly calm effortlessly control the chaotic. Yet, the fundamental secret they withhold is that genuine, lasting control is not extracted from the external world. It is forged in the silent chambers of your own being. You cannot issue a commanding order to others if you remain a slave to your own fleeting moods. You cannot influence the grand arc of the world if your actions are still governed by raw, unmastered emotions. And you will forever be a part of the crowd if you insist on thinking like them. Mental power is the ultimate, silent, invisible weapon, subtle and deadly. This journey will be a deliberate confrontation, forcing you to face every single weakness, fear, and illusion you've been sheltering. But if you stay with me until the very end, you will emerge sharpened to a razor's edge, utterly composed, and fundamentally more dangerous than you entered. Because when you have mastered your mind, no earthly force can truly touch you. Number 1. Mental power over external power. The masses are hypnotized by the symbols of external power: the size of the bank account, the reach of the reputation, the weight of the title, the gleam of possessions. But these are, at best, mere reflections, and more often, fragile illusions. A man can command a fortune, but if a sudden crisis strips him of his composure, he is instantaneously and utterly powerless. Conversely, another may own absolutely nothing, yet if he remains calm, relentlessly strategic, and perfectly in control of his inner state, that man holds the only power that truly matters. Machiavelli recognized that any external command is utterly meaningless without absolute internal command. He noted that fortune may control half of life, but the other half, the decisive half, is the sole domain of the strength of our mind. A mind that is truly powerful possesses the gravity to bend fate itself, seamlessly converting what appears to be failure into potent opportunity and transforming agonizing pain into the raw material of discipline. A weak mind, facing the exact same weight, simply collapses under the strain. The critical difference is never the situation, it is always the perception. When you rigorously train your mind to dominate both your thoughts and your emotional responses, External circumstances cease to be the primary dictator of your path. You stop the knee-jerk, reactive cycle, and you begin the deliberate, powerful act of directing. True power is born the moment you no longer require outside validation, applause, titles, or approval to determine your self-worth. When you are the one person in the room who remains perfectly calm while everyone else descends into panic, when you hold firm confidence while others drown in doubt, and when your focus remains laser-sharp while the world crumbles around you, that is the very moment you become a dangerous force. Machiavelli's core instruction to us is simple, potent, and non-negotiable. Rule yourself first. Every lasting, great empire began not on a battlefield, but within the mind of a singular person. Mental power is the continuous, invisible force that dictates precisely how you think, how you feel, and how you choose to act under the most crushing pressure. It's not about becoming an unfeeling automaton. It is about becoming unshakable. When your thoughts finally obey you, when fear is immediately processed as a signal for action rather than a paralyzing chain, and when pain is converted into pure fuel instead of accepted as defeat, you ascend to a stratum that most people cannot even perceive. You are now capable of seeing through all illusions. You act with surgical precision. You cease to be controlled by outcomes because you have internalized the fundamental truth that control exists only in your chosen response. The strong mind actively bends the world to its own determined will. The weak mind merely bends under the world's weight. Therefore, build discipline, not reliance on others. Build clarity of vision, not internal chaos. The instant you reject being ruled by comfort, you automatically begin to be ruled by a higher, uncompromising purpose. When your mind is finally transformed into an impenetrable fortress, no external force, not the sharpest insult, not the most devastating failure, not the deepest loss, can breach it. Power does not need to shout, it commands silently. The mind that cannot be moved is the mind that moves the world. Machiavelli said, "He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior." Remember this ultimate victory before you seek to rule anything or anyone else. I control my world through my mind. Number 2, emotional detachment, the unclouded lens. Emotions are raw, surging forces, yes, but the moment they seize control of your consciousness, they instantly incinerate your clarity, obliterate your discipline, and dismantle your strategy. The most widespread weakness in the vast majority of people is not mere ignorance. It is crippling emotional impulsiveness. They instantly, carelessly react to a spike of anger, a sting of envy, or a surge of fear, thereby fully exposing their intentions and their psychological levers before they've even begun to comprehend the true nature of the game. Machiavelli once instructed that men are primarily driven by the twin forces of love or fear, and the wise ruler must learn to utilize both without ever being consumed by either. Detachment is not about adopting a heartless stance. It is about establishing absolute command over your inner state. When you operate from a detached position, you are capable of feeling profoundly, yet your subsequent action is always deliberate. You refuse to allow a burst of anger to be the primary engine of your decisions. You forbid disappointment from locking you into paralysis. You learn the crucial skill of observing emotions as they manifest, and only then do you consciously choose precisely how and when to deploy them. A detached mind is uniquely sharp because it is never obscured or clouded. It sees with piercing clarity in moments when everyone else is literally drowning in chaos. The individual who maintains a perfect, steady composure while the world around them is breaking into pieces is inevitably the one who ends up controlling the outcomes. Machiavelli recognized that rulers who displayed too much of their emotional life actively invited manipulation. When your adversaries understand exactly what triggers a reaction in you, they will use that lever relentlessly against you. But when they cannot possibly read you, when your unyielding calm acts as a perfect shield for both your immense strength and your long-term strategy, they are instantly rendered uncertain, cautious, and psychologically powerless. Emotional detachment grants you psychological dominance. It keeps every competitor constantly guessing, and it compels respect from every ally. It is the process that converts raw pain into actionable information, transmutes rejection into valuable data, and refines betrayal into crucial insight. Every emotional storm you navigate becomes pure, concentrated fuel for a greater, deeper understanding. You cease the self-pitying question of, "Why did this happen to me?" and instantly upgrade to the commanding inquiry of, "What exactly does this teach me?" That shift in perspective is the genesis of all power. It transforms meaningless suffering into profound evolution. To be detached is to place an iron guard around your inner kingdom, protecting it from any invasion of external drama. Once the mind is absolutely still, the body will follow suit, and your soul will regain its perfect, lethal balance. You begin to move through life as a master chess player, unpredictable in your timing, infinitely patient, and utterly unprovoked by the small acts of others. No reaction, only response. No chaos, only calculation. Machiavelli stated, "He who controls his passions controls his destiny." This control is not about becoming cold, it is about becoming precise. When your emotions are finally forced to obey your superior reason, your decisions become unbreakable, solid like steel. The world will relentlessly attempt to drag you into its overwhelming noise, its petty insults, its endless drama, its cheap temptations. But detachment maintains your focus in a state of absolute purity. The individual who feels everything internally but meticulously reveals nothing externally is essentially untouchable. You become a perfectly polished mirror, reflecting every situation back without absorbing any of the filth. This is the very core of mental dominance. True strength is the unflinching calmness under fire, the perfect silence under maximum pressure, and the unyielding poise while under a direct, aggressive attack. Remember this rule: the calm mind always wins. I feel everything, reveal nothing. Number 3, breaking the chains of approval. The desperate, insatiable hunger for validation is the most invisible and effective chain that keeps potentially powerful minds perpetually enslaved. Most people spend their entire lives in a frantic, exhausting pursuit of acceptance from their family, their friends, their immediate social circles, and even total strangers on the internet. They mistakenly gauge their entire self-worth by the fickle, meaningless metrics of external opinions, social media likes, and the brief rush of applause. But every single time you seek approval, you are handing over a piece of the control over your most intimate resource, your emotions. Machiavelli warned that men who make their honor dependent on others will never achieve true authority. Why? Because the moment your self-image relies on an external, shifting validation, you instantly become predictable, desperate, and remarkably easy to manipulate. The approval seeker compulsively bends and warps their core character to fit the temporary expectations of others. The truly powerful individual does the reverse. He shapes the expectations of others around his immovable, self-determined character. To become mentally dangerous, you must perform a brutal, surgical operation to cut out the addiction of simply being liked. Grasp this essential dynamic. Approval is the highest form of control. People will enthusiastically praise you when your actions conveniently serve their interests, and they will immediately discard or reject you when you decisively choose to serve your own. When you finally eliminate your need for their validation, you instantly become immune to their most subtle manipulations. You stop living a performative life merely to please others, and you begin living a commanding life dedicated to your vision. Machiavelli firmly believed that true respect is not a gift granted through begging, flattery, or superficial charm. It is a force that is actively enforced through unyielding strength, absolute certainty, and relentless consistency. You do not need to ask for respect. You project it silently through the quality of your actions, the measured tone of your voice, and the immovable nature of your presence. Approval is a fleeting ghost, rapidly fading away, but power, rooted in self-possession, leaves a deep and lasting mark. The weak are trapped chasing acceptance. The strong are busy creating profound influence. When your actions are driven by internal principle rather than external popularity, your decisions become the architect of your own destiny instead of being timidly shaped by a fear of being judged. Every great ruler in history endured fierce criticism before they were ever praised. Every true innovator was mercilessly mocked before they were universally admired. And every mentally powerful person was fundamentally misunderstood before they commanded true respect. You must detach completely from the desperate need to be perceived as good. Focus your entire being on being effective. The world ultimately respects tangible results, not fragile feelings. The man who no longer craves the fleeting rush of applause possesses a mind that no external insult, no matter how sharp, can penetrate. When your entire self-worth is a deeply internal construct, your resulting actions become unstoppable forces. Machiavelli gave us the chilling calculus. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. This is not a license for deliberate cruelty. It is an assertion of the strength of a fully formed identity. Fear in this context is simply respect that is absolutely rooted in certainty. Love is unstable and eventually fades, but genuine respect, once earned, remains. The act of approval-seeking is the quintessential behavior of those who doubt their own value. Absolute confidence is the ultimate expression of those who know exactly who they are. When you decisively stop asking for external permission to be great, you instantly begin the process of embodying greatness. Silence the frantic, judging crowd inside your own head. You don't need their validation. You only need the clarity of your vision. I don't seek approval. I create respect. Number 4. Predator versus prey mindset. In every single arena of life, business, relationships, or conflict, there exist only two fundamental mental operating systems. There is the predator and there is the prey. The predator moves through its world with intense, focused concentration, infinite patience, and surgical calculation. The prey is defined by its hesitation, its constant, panicked reaction, and its debilitating fear. The crucial difference between these two archetypes is not a matter of sheer physical strength or raw intellect. It is entirely a matter of mindset. Machiavelli asserted that a wise ruler must learn how to combine the raw, uncompromising strength of the lion with the intricate, careful cunning of the fox. The predator mind perfectly embodies both profound courage and subtle strategy. It observes its environment in utter silence, meticulously studies every movement around it, and strikes only when the outcome of the action is predetermined and certain. The prey, conversely, squanders all its precious energy in panicked flailing, desperate wishing, and crippling overthinking. Mental predators do not waste a single moment chasing approval or rushing into an emotional explosion. They are defined by playing the long game. They understand with perfect clarity that timing is the ultimate power. The predator never, under any circumstances, exposes its full capabilities. It never reveals its true long-term intention. And it never ever confuses purposeful, deliberate action with mere reaction. It moves with absolute purpose, never desperation. To successfully cultivate the predator mindset, you must ruthlessly eliminate all hesitation. Doubt is the fastest acting poison to your ambition. The longer you allow yourself to think, debate, and second-guess before acting on a clear plan, the faster your confidence will bleed away. However, calculated silence is a different entity entirely from paralyzing hesitation. Silence, for the predator, is observation. You watch not from a place of fear, but from a strategic need to predict every possible move. You move not because some external force pushes you, but because you have patiently selected the perfect moment. Machiavelli taught a chilling lesson. Those who idly wait for permission will forever live under the oppressive thumb of those who simply act. The world does not belong to those who merely hope for it. It belongs to those who definitively claim it. The predator mindset is not inherently about brute aggression. It is about supreme awareness. It means seeing directly through every layer of deception, accurately anticipating future moves, and remaining emotionally invisible at all times. The mentally dangerous man approaches the study of human behavior with the intense, focused dedication of a hunter tracking game through a dense forest, quietly, constantly, and relentlessly. He knows with absolute certainty who is genuinely weak, who is merely performing, who can be useful to his aims, and who poses a genuine threat. He constructs his entire environment strategically, never emotionally. The prey mind plays checkers, making short, obvious moves. The predator mind plays chess, where every single response, every silence, and every carefully calibrated smile is laden with deep, specific intent. You must stop believing that your survival depends on being liked. It depends entirely on being perfectly aware. Machiavelli warned, "The one who deceives will always find someone who lets himself be deceived." Refuse absolutely to be that person. Never broadcast your fears. Never carelessly expose your plans. Move through the world like water, calm on the surface, perfectly clear in intent, and utterly unstoppable in its flow. The calm mind is the superior hunter because it is never rushed or compromised by impulse. When the world around you descends into a panic, you remain perfectly composed. When others react blindly, you intensely analyze. The predator does not compete with others. It dominates by understanding the entire field of play. That is mental superiority, silent, focused, and absolutely deadly. I move with precision. Number 5. Psychological disguise. The unreadable enigma. The most dangerously effective mind is the one that chooses to conceal its core truth behind an expertly crafted mask. Power thrives in the void of silence and the fog of confusion. The precise moment that others can accurately predict your thoughts, you have permanently surrendered your fundamental advantage. Machiavelli famously stated that rulers must always appear virtuous to the public eye, but their actual conduct must be dictated strictly according to necessity. The lesson is simple. Show the world precisely what they expect to see, while keeping your deepest, truest motives completely hidden. Psychological disguise is not merely deceit. It is a critical, self-protective strategy. It is the refined art of revealing absolutely nothing, while you observe, process, and analyze absolutely everything. Weak minds desperately crave to be understood and validated. Powerful minds consciously choose to be unreadable. When you permit others to see the entirety of your emotions, they instantly learn your psychological triggers. When you prematurely broadcast your ambitions, they instantly learn the most effective ways to block your ascent. A mind that remains meticulously concealed becomes an unsolvable mystery, and mysteries are the source of both profound fear and compelling fascination. That is the ultimate control. You must learn to operate behind complex layers of presentation. Let your perfectly calm face be the impenetrable shield that conceals your true strategy. Allow your carefully chosen words to be the misdirection that distracts from your actual direction. Let your sustained, unnerving silence build a psychological curiosity that works exclusively in your favor. Machiavelli believed that perception is the force that shapes power far more effectively than objective truth. Therefore, by mastering the art of disguise, you gain the power to shape how others react without ever revealing how you genuinely think. When people cannot decisively tell if you are currently weak or strong, angry or calm, lost or perfectly in control, their natural response is hesitation. That hesitation is your most potent weapon. Psychological disguise is the engine of unpredictability, and unpredictability in the realm of influence is dominance. Never over-explain. Never react immediately to a provocation. Never feel compelled to clarify every single move you make. The simple unknown element is the psychological lever that keeps others constantly guessing, and that sustained guessing is what maintains your absolute superiority. The best manipulators in the world are not the loudest voices. They are the silent, meticulous architects of psychological confusion. They subtly plant the seeds of thought, shift the prevailing narratives, and then vanish entirely behind the perfection of their self-crafted image. Even when you are forced to speak the truth, layer it carefully with ambiguity. Machiavelli observed, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand." What he meant is that people believe what they visually perceive, not what the underlying reality actually is. You must use that fundamental human blindness to your immense benefit. Appear perfectly calm when you are deep in the throes of plotting your next devastating move. Appear utterly broken when you are actually in the midst of a radical, powerful rebuilding. Appear harmless and utterly non-threatening when you are secretly sharpening your most dangerous blade. Your paramount goal must always be to control what they perceive. The mind that is unreadable becomes the mind that is unconquerable. Every truly great strategist wears a necessary mask, not to deceive the entire world, but purely to protect his deepest, most vulnerable kingdom, his intentions. Remember this immutable truth. Your thoughts are your sovereign fortress. The moment they are exposed, the enemy is already walking through the main gate. Learn to speak less, to reveal drastically less, and to move far more strategically. The world simply cannot destroy what it cannot fully understand. Be the gathering storm hidden behind the perfect stillness. Be the fire that burns intensely behind the placid, unchanging smile. My silence is my shield. Number 6. Invisible power. Influence without display. The highest and most enduring form of power is the one that no one is able to see. The loudest, most visible leaders are often the first to fall because they confuse fleeting visibility with enduring control. Machiavelli stated that it is far safer to be feared than to be loved, but the most secure, most dominant position of all is to be neither, only to be profoundly felt. Invisible power is influence achieved without any outward display. It is command executed without overt force. It is absolute control maintained without any exposure. This is the quiet, unspoken authority that meticulously shapes every outcome without ever needing a single moment of recognition or applause. When your sheer presence alone subtly alters the behavior of everyone around you, even without uttering a single word, you have crossed the threshold into mastery. The truly strong do not feel the need to loudly announce their strength. They allow others to simply sense it. The weak are the ones who shout desperately just to be noticed. The wise remain perfectly quiet and intently observe the reactions they evoke. To successfully build invisible power, you must master the delicate art of subtle manipulation. This is not about cruelty, it is about precise calibration. Instead of demanding explicit obedience, you influence perception. Instead of using aggressive argument, you guide thoughts by carefully positioning your ideas. The moment others genuinely believe that your ideas are their own original thoughts, your control over them becomes absolute and total. Machiavelli instructed that rulers must learn to act indirectly, because the deployment of direct, overt force inevitably provokes fierce resistance. That same immutable principle applies perfectly to the mind. The invisible mind leads not by applying pressure, but by the gravitational force of its presence. It draws attention and intrigue through a profound sense of mystery, not by creating noise or drama. The instant people can accurately define the limits of your authority, they can begin to measure it, and anything that can be measured can ultimately be overthrown. This is why the unseen, quiet strategist outlasts the visible, loud ruler. Power that moves only in silence can never be successfully destroyed, because no one knows exactly where to launch the attack. Your single-minded goal should be to heavily influence every decision around you without ever appearing to do so. Make others feel the profound weight of your absence far more acutely than they feel the impact of your presence. When you eventually walk away, your sheer energetic force should still be the unseen hand guiding the entire room. When you choose to speak, your measured words should continue to echo in the minds of others, long after total silence has returned. True mental dominance never requires a hostile confrontation. It bends reality itself through calm, unshakable command. Machiavelli noted, "Men in general judge more by the sense of sight than by the sense of touch, because everyone can see but few can feel. Invisible power deliberately flips that rule. You stop actively showing and you begin the process of making them deeply feel. When others can intensely sense your strength but cannot possibly trace its source, they instinctively obey the energy. You become a silent psychological shadow, unseen yet completely unavoidable. The less information you reveal, the more they are forced to imagine. And imagination, you must understand, is a psychological force far more potent than objective truth. Invisible power is not about hiding forever. It is about striking only when the moment of revelation perfectly serves your grand strategy, appear only when it directly benefits you, and vanish the instant it doesn't. That is control on a Machiavellian level, subtle, fluid, and utterly unstoppable. My presence speaks louder than words. Number 7, self-mastery before world mastery. Before you can even dream of attempting to control the complex world outside of you, you must first brutally conquer the inner storm. Every person fantasizes about dominance, but very few comprehend that the single greatest and most relentless enemy is not external, it is internal. Machiavelli pronounced that the first and by far the greatest victory is the absolute victory of conquering yourself. You cannot possibly command entire groups of people if you cannot even command your own fleeting impulses. You cannot lead other minds if you are still unable to successfully lead your own emotions. Self-mastery is the immovable foundation upon which every true empire is built. It is the core, concentrated essence of every disciplined mind. It is the single, secret weapon of every strategic thinker in history. The undisciplined man is merely a slave to his most base urges, to anger, to greed, to lust, to fear, and to self-destructive pride. The disciplined man, however, commands these forces as if they were simple tools. He fully experiences the emotion, but he meticulously chooses the subsequent action. He senses the strong pull of temptation, but he absolutely decides the timing and nature of his response. He acknowledges the surrounding chaos, but he unilaterally builds internal order. Self-control is not the same as suppressing your natural instincts. It is the powerful act of directing them with surgical precision. When your deepest desires are finally forced to obey your superior intellect, you instantly become unstoppable. The weak man habitually blames the world for his failures. The strong man is busy rewiring his own reactions. Every instance where you consciously delay gratification, every time you successfully resist provocation, or every moment you remain perfectly calm under a sharp insult, you are actively sharpening your mental sword. Every uncontrolled, explosive reaction leaks away valuable power. Every controlled, measured response expands it exponentially. Machiavelli understood that all forms of leadership begin with restraint, because power that lacks discipline will inevitably collapse under the slightest pressure. Kings and empires fall not because of an external invasion, but because of internal corruption. The exact same fatal flaw applies to the mind. When raw emotion is allowed to rule logic, total destruction is the only possible outcome. Self-mastery grants you the incredible strength to stand completely alone, to remain utterly unmoved when the crowd sways violently, and to think with perfect clarity when fear has blinded everyone else. It is the foundation that builds unshakable consistency, and consistency is the only force that builds lasting credibility. Without this inner command, success is reduced to nothing more than random luck. With it, success becomes an inevitability. Master your own focus, and the world will suddenly become predictable. Master your own anger, and all your enemies lose their psychological leverage. Master your deepest fears, and challenges are magically transformed into powerful opportunities. Machiavelli taught that whoever desires constant success must be willing to change his conduct with the changing times. To adapt to this constant change requires iron control, because adaptation without internal stability is merely collapse. The self-mastered man can pivot strategies elegantly without ever losing his core direction. He navigates chaos with a shocking elegance because his center is absolutely unshakable. This is the single quality that forever separates the rulers from the ruled. The deep, profound ability to remain calm while everything around you is engulfed in flames. Remember, the mind that rules itself can never be conquered. The greatest throne you will ever sit upon is your own consciousness. And the most significant crown you will ever wear is your own discipline. When you have conquered yourself, the world is naturally compelled to follow. I rule myself completely. Number 8. Building a mental fortress. The external world will relentlessly and constantly attempt to gain unauthorized entry into your mind, using every tool at its disposal. False praise, harsh criticism, seductive flattery, and debilitating fear. Every single word that reaches your ears is, in reality, either a subtle weapon or a deliberate test. The majority of people foolishly allow these incoming arrows to pierce directly into their emotional core, granting everyone else free, instant access to their internal peace and focus. A strong mind, however, does not build inviting doors. It constructs massive, impermeable walls. Machiavelli advised that a wise ruler must construct defenses so absolutely secure that no enemy even dares to launch an attack. That exact principle is the blueprint for the mind. Your key psychological defenses are absolute silence, intense, single-point focus, and perfect detachment. When a wave of insults arrives, they merely bounce harmlessly off your impenetrable composure. When external praise comes, it passes right through without inflating or distorting your ego. You cease to be a reactive entity, and you begin the commanding process of being intensely selective about what you allow in. Building a fully functional mental fortress is the critical act of protecting your most valuable resource, your energy, from emotional theft and drain. Every single unnecessary reaction costs you power. Every still, calm moment preserves and increases it. People will consistently attempt to provoke, manipulate, or distract you because they cannot psychologically tolerate a mind that simply cannot be moved or shaken. They will relentlessly test your limits with deliberate drama, calculated deceit, or overwhelming temptation. But once your inner walls are forged from solid steel, their frantic efforts simply collapse into nothingness. Machiavelli taught that the initial act of control begins with perception. And when you exert absolute control over what is allowed to enter your perception, you gain absolute control over how reality impacts you. Guard your focus as if it were the most sacred, irreplaceable treasure you possess, because it is. Every second you allow to be wasted on meaningless chatter or pointless, unproductive conflict is a deliberate act that weakens your internal defenses. The mentally dangerous man permits no one to mentally rent space in his head, free of charge. He observes the surrounding noise but steadfastly refuses to absorb it. He hears the external chaos but adamantly forbids it from echoing internally. This fortress is not constructed overnight. It is meticulously forged through constant repetition, purposeful silence, and a deep, penetrating awareness. You must learn the habit of a deliberate pause before every response, a measured breath before every reaction, and a critical evaluation before accepting any external belief. The more perfectly you master this subtle art, the less the volatile external world will control your calm internal weather. Machiavelli's guiding insight here is, he who becomes master of others must first master himself. Your mental fortress is the physical, psychological manifestation of that ultimate mastery. It is the state that permits you to remain perfectly calm when provoked, rigorously strategic when challenged, and functionally invisible when threatened. Protect your thoughts from corruption by being an aggressive filter of what you consume. Guard your attention with the uncompromising vigilance of a king guarding his most precious crown. A wandering mind is, by definition, a conquered mind. A focused mind is a self-contained empire. Once you are mentally fortified, you entirely eliminate the need to prove anything to anyone. Peace becomes your unbreakable armor. Patience becomes your strategic weapon, and focus becomes your unyielding shield. The calm mind is permanently impenetrable. Remember, silence cannot be defeated. My mind is my fortress. Number 9. Rule without a crown. The power of presence. True rulers operate beyond the need for visible recognition, formal titles, or temporary applause. Their profound influence exists entirely beyond the need for visibility. They command silently, they lead with innate natural gravity, and they dominate through the sheer force of their presence rather than the fleeting power of their position. Machiavelli observed that men are psychologically more impressed by what they can see than by what they can feel. Yet, the wisest ruler deliberately flips that very truth. He leads through unseen, felt force, never through an overt, shallow show. The illusion of positional authority fades rapidly, but genuine power, which is deeply rooted in unshakable inner certainty, endures eternally. To master the act of ruling without a crown is to fundamentally understand that status is temporary and conditional. But a commanding presence is eternal. You do not need to loudly announce your dominance when people feel the undeniable weight of it the very second you step into a room. Confidence that makes zero demands for external validation becomes magnetically powerful. You move through the world with a different gravitational pull when your profound sense of power does not depend on the whims of approval or the rigid structure of a hierarchy. You act with an inherent absolute assurance because your chosen direction does not require any external confirmation. Machiavelli believed that control gained through either fear or admiration must still be rigorously maintained through raw skill. Otherwise, it will inevitably vanish. The invisible ruler maintains perfect order through his unique energetic signature, never through overt, clumsy enforcement. He shapes outcomes subtly, guiding minds with quiet, focused conviction, instead of through loud, open demands. Those who rely solely on their formal authority instantly lose all influence the moment the crown is removed. But those who command respect through the sheer force of their developed character never lose their psychological hold on others. To rule effectively without relying on visible symbols, you must possess perfect composure under the highest pressure, total decisiveness amidst the worst confusion, and a profound balance even in the face of overwhelming success. True leadership is never about being served by others. It is about being the single, stable point when every other person around you collapses. People instinctively and profoundly trust those who constantly radiate certainty, not those who merely shout commands. The calm man naturally becomes the unwavering anchor for a fearful, panicking crowd. His sustained silence speaks with an authority louder than any speech. His deliberate restraint is a psychological force more potent than any aggressive display. Machiavelli reminded us that loyalty is constructed not on fragile emotion, but on perceived, undeniable strength. When you project absolute stability, others naturally align with your rhythm, because your presence feels uniquely safe and solid. That is the definition of psychological leadership: quiet influence, controlled dominance, and invisible power. You must learn to ruthlessly detach your identity from any titles because they do not, in any way, define your capability. The throne is not what creates the ruler. The quality of the ruler is what makes the throne meaningful. Influence without recognition is the pinnacle of all mastery. When you stop frantically chasing acknowledgement, you become entirely unforgettable. Rule exclusively through the force of your behavior, never through loud declarations. Guide with unshakable wisdom, never with cheap fear. Lead without ever claiming the position of leadership, and others will follow you with absolute instinct. That is the refined essence of Machiavellian control, authority built solely on the complete mastery of your presence. I lead without titles. Number 10. The Machiavellian mindset. The embodiment of power. The Machiavellian mindset is the dark, intricate art of entirely becoming power itself, not merely seeking it, not temporarily borrowing it, but thoroughly embodying it until control flows naturally, silently through your very presence. Machiavelli believed that men rise either through raw virtue or pure fortune, but only those individuals who possess truly disciplined minds are able to remain above both. To think and operate like a Machiavellian is to perform the necessary detachment from all comforting illusions and to commit to the absolute mastery of reality as it truly is. You cease wishing that the world were some idealized fair place, and you begin the intense, relentless process of understanding precisely how it truly operates beneath the surface. You analyze human behavior not through the distorting lens of emotion, but through the cold, precise dynamics of cause and effect. The Machiavellian mind studies patterns of behavior, never fleeting feelings. It is fixated on concrete results, never on self-serving excuses. It does not waste time complaining about manipulation because it is too busy learning and mastering the core mechanics of influence. It processes weakness as valuable information. It uses betrayal as direct instruction, and it sees chaos as a profound opportunity for strategic gain. The modern world relentlessly teaches emotional fragility. The Machiavellian, in stark contrast, learns and practices emotional precision. He understands the painful reality that raw morality without a guiding strategy will lead only to certain defeat. Yet, he also recognizes that strategy deployed without any morality eventually breeds a terrible, hollow emptiness. Therefore, he walks the razor's edge between the two, meticulously controlling his balance with absolute, unblinking awareness. Power does not have the capacity to corrupt the truly Machiavellian mind. It merely reveals the quality of the mind that wields it. He understands that power is not a moral entity. It is neither good nor evil. It is a neutral energy that is fundamentally shaped by the intent behind it. He refuses to waste a single moment proving himself to others because he knows with perfect clarity that perception is the only battlefield that ultimately matters. When you have perfectly mastered perception, you no longer chase validation. You actively design and deploy influence. Machiavelli left us with the ultimate catalyst for action. It is better to act and repent than not to act and regret. That single phrase is the pure essence of his philosophy. Courage that is guided, never blinded, by superior intelligence. The Machiavellian acts decisively every single time because he knows that indecision is a silent killer that slays more dreams than outright failure ever could. He adapts and flows like water, navigating through resistance, constantly molding himself to the circumstances without ever compromising or losing his core identity. Every single challenge he faces instantly becomes a critical test of his composure. Every loss is immediately processed as intense training for a greater degree of control. He is utterly ruthless with all forms of distraction. He is loyal only to his core vision, and he is perfectly detached from anything that could possibly threaten his mental clarity. To live and operate with this mindset is to function in a psychological realm where emotion is a deliberate servant of purpose, and logic is the sole driver of all movement. It is not about becoming heartless, it is about becoming unbreakable. The Machiavellian doesn't need to fight for dominance. He becomes dominance. His power does not scream or demand attention. It vibrates quietly, constantly reshaping everything and everyone around him. The individual who truly owns his mind cannot, under any circumstances, be ruled by others, because his absolute stability becomes a profound force of gravity that others are unable to escape. That, my friends, is what makes him genuinely dangerous. His control is invisible to the untrained eye, but it is absolute. The world's collective fear is reserved for those who cannot be provoked, who cannot be controlled, and who cannot be predicted. Most of humanity lives in a state of constant, desperate reaction. Their entire lives are dictated by the casual opinions, the shallow insults, and the shifting circumstances of others. They surrender their inherent power the very moment they allow their emotions to take the lead. But you have now learned the dark truth. You have discovered that the greatest battlefield is internal, that all true influence originates in the disciplined thought, and that dominance is quietly earned through relentless discipline, cold strategy, and absolute awareness. Machiavelli's final wisdom. Rulers who master themselves need never fear the fleeting chaos around them. You are now fully equipped to stand unshaken, to move through life without desperation, and to act decisively without needing permission from anyone. The inner crown you now wear is beyond theft because it is forged from the total mastery of your mind, your emotions, and your perception. Every insult that once inflicted a wound now passes like a mere whisper of wind against steel. Every fleeting praise that once dangerously distracted you now floats by, weightless and irrelevant. You have been transformed into a force that is quiet, utterly subtle, and fundamentally impossible to manipulate. Your influence no longer requires your tedious explanation. Your authority no longer demands any recognition. Your presence itself speaks volumes, your decisions create profound ripples, and your deep focus becomes entirely untouchable. Remember this, always. Power begins, endures, and is perfected within. Once you command your thoughts, control your reactions, and master your absolute identity, The external world will naturally and inevitably bend to your will. You are no longer merely a player in the games of others. You have become the solitary architect of your own reality. This is the essence of true mental danger: calm, invisible, and utterly undeniable strength. Let this powerful mindset guide every choice, every conversation, and every single action you take. The war is already won inside. And now, with your mind as your final, unshakable fortress, nothing can conquer you. You are now part of a path few dare to walk, a path toward becoming truly untouchable. My mind rules everything.